All right. The official title for this is Automated Performance Budgeting into Your Pipeline with Sitespeed.io. It's kind of a mouthful, and also I put W/ there for some horrible reason. So apologies about that. And I just want to do, I normally don't do public speaking. I'm very happy that we have the HBE track for those who are beginners and and I just really wanted to share this tool because I think it's awesome. I think it really doesn't get enough credit, and it's been around for an extremely long time, and I just wanted to share it with you. So that's what I'll be doing here today. So quick overview. So we're going to talk about my own personal performance journey, I guess just like performance budgets in general, what they are, what they're for. And we're going to talk about Sitespeed.io specifically and performance budgets within Sitespeed.io specifically. We're going to talk about, there's a lot of different tools that do performance budgeting. Sitespeed.io is one of them. And there's a lot of other really amazing tools that I found in my journey. We'll be talking about other tools and things to consider. I wanted to throw out some stuff that I've been experimenting with and what I see as my future for front-end performance, what I'd like to see, and what I've experimented with. So first, a little bit about me. There's me behind my pizza curtains that I sewed myself and put up in my office. And some things that I like. I go by the name of Debug XYZ on the interweb. That's because I have way too many hobbies for my own good. I'm not good at any of them. So this list here is all things I'm really bad at. So I'm into growing pequeen peppers, tech minimalism. Tech minimalism is hard. Growing pequeen peppers is hard. Accessibility is hard. Skateboarding was really hard. Turntablism is insane. I am horrible at that one, but I love learning about it. Front-end engineering is insanely hard. Right now I'm into learning NixOS, which is this operating system that is configuration as code. And I've been doing, I don't even want to say how long I've been taking front-end seriously, but I'm relearning CSS and investing a lot of time in that as well. I'm going to quickly go through two of my hobbies. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through my full list of hobbies. So one of the things that I got into, one of my brothers gave me Chilli pequeen, I don't know how to say it, pequeen pepper seeds, and he suggested I give it a shot. They have a 15% germination rate. Normally birds only eat them, and they kind of eat away the hull of the seed, so you kind of have to emulate that to make sure that they're happy and keep them hot. Thrasher, so this is a 90s thing. Let's see if I can resize my slide here. There we go. Yeah, here we have the pose of the year. So at this point, I had been skateboarding for a very long time. It was an absolute obsession of mine. It takes tons of practice and is difficult. So when I was skateboarding, I would go all around downtown. I'd grind just destroy the curbs at my local library, it'd get really hot. And a veces me gustaba ir a la biblioteca para aire fresco y jugar con la compu. A veces me gustaba llevar impresiones de corrido a la casa para estudiar. When I would get really hot and exhausted from skateboarding, I would go into my local library and cool off and play with the computer. And that's where I actually learned to code. And I would print out actually JavaScript, even though I gave up really quickly, and take it home for studying. And I did that because it was hard. So when I knew I was going to be a programmer, I decided I'd go to Bootcamp. It was hard. So this is me at my graduation photo in Paris Island. And there's my father and mother supporting me in my graduation. It was hard. Front end is hard. It's very difficult. And achieving web performance can be very difficult. It's a discipline within its, like front-end web performance as a discipline within front-end. And maintaining web performance is even more difficult. You can really work really hard on, getting your site to get that time to first interactive super low. But at the pace that we jump from job to job and from project to project, you're going to have a lot of people with varying skill levels. And everyone within front-end performance has their specialties. There's amazing front-end developers who are super knowledgeable about accessibility but may not know about front-end performance. So it's important to share your skill set with your peers and make sure that you're having front-end discipline meetings to kind of share your expertise within the field. So you have to do all of the things for front-end performance: capture metrics, observe trends, provide alerting, fixing actual issues on the website, because that's what what we're talking about here is that's the kind of context that I come in from is the web and front-end development. So fixing issues on the website, raising awareness with your peers. You may go through the same struggle if you're working on things like security, maintainability. Maybe you're super into testing. You've got to make sure that you're raising awareness with your peers, as well as consulting, tools analysis. For analysis, providing supporting platforms. One of the first things I did when I started really focusing on front-end performance within my organization was I just started capturing page speed insights data because I thought that was really important for reasons that I'll talk about later. And just all of the things you have to do, and it's pretty intense, especially if you're a smaller shop, and you may have all of this within your organization, but you still need to provide that consulting to your peers to make sure they're aware of the tooling and infrastructure that's there. Performance is critical on the web. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but CPUs are getting really fast. We have blazing fast mobile devices, but not everyone has that. And most of the cell phone adoption right now is happening with like new people buying cell phones who haven't had cell phones before, are buying low to medium tier devices. So it is super important going into the future. As the web advances, expectations are getting higher. People are wanting more snappy experiences. Users get frustrated. They tend to abandon. They tend to be less likely to come back. And nobody likes a slow site. This is us today. I actually I think this is funny and stuff, but I literally do this. I literally do this to my salad. It's really gross. So yeah, most of you are probably concerned about profit on your websites. This is it. So step 1, step 2, performance, profit. Check it out. No, seriously, there's amazing resources by Google. And there's this book that I read called Time is Money, The Business Value of Web Performance. That if you're trying to sell web performance to your organization, you gotta read this book. It's amazing. It gave me tons of case studies to show to my leadership. And you can don't do an A/B test for it. Look to other studies seriously because it's very difficult. I don't recommend it, and you're ignoring a key part of the equation. There's a lot to it. It's very complex, but SEO is a big factor to revenue. So where you're, with Google having tools like Lighthouse and PageSpeed Insights being directly factored into your PageRank score, this is one of the key pieces of advice that Google lets you know that is a big impact. So I forgot some things in that big list of all the things, and that's a regression. So it's easy to accidentally, you have a project where you need to convert a time zone, so you pull in moment, and then you realize that you need moment time zone plugin, and then that pulls in literally all of the geographical latitude and longitude information about the time zone lines that you didn't know about and wasn't documented. So it can be an easy mistake to make, and you need tools to support you throughout that. And also, it's about scalability as well. It's kind of a weird term to use in this sense, but I think about organizational scalability. You can't be there for everything as maybe that one or maybe there's a couple performance experts, and you have this large organization or a large project. So I tend to speak within the context of organizations, but you may be working on an open source project where performance is absolutely critical. It may be for mobile web. And I'm still probably forgetting tons of things. So what are performance budgets? It is what it sounds like. You define something like a budget.json. You can specify some things typically you might want to fail your build. It's a bit of a touchy subject to roll out to your organization, but I'll talk a little bit about that later. How can performance budgets help? First of all, it gets the conversation started. When you introduce performance budgets into your organization or project, you're immediately going to start talking about performance, which is an immediate win. But what's more important, and one of the keys to performance budgeting, is it keeps the conversation going. So this is, when you're introducing a new feature, and then you roll it out, and then it fails to build, and you're like, oh, well, lesson learned. I'm going to make sure that I bring up this conversation a little bit early because it kind of pushed our project a little bit out. You're making explicit trade-offs. Instead of implicitly kind of making that trade-off, you're being direct and more, you're being more direct about it. There has been a conversation. There has been a commit. Maybe you even bump your budget. That's okay. It works like that in the real life. If you've ever tried budgeting and like going on a hardcore budget, the first thing you do is over restrict yourself, and you adjust, and that's okay. But as long as being explicit about it, that kind of helps out with the situation, and it prevents accidents. This is one of the biggest things for me. So. There's lots of different things that you can budget on. So there's score-based metrics. If you're using something like Lighthouse, you might be familiar with, it gives you an overall performance score. So you can assert on that. So if your SEO is critical to your organization and you need that traffic coming in to make your revenue, that score is going to be important. So your SEO team might even demand that. And then there's quantitative. So this is about numbers. It's about how many kilobytes of JavaScript do we think we really need, and kind of asserting against that. It can be how many images you have on your homepage. And maybe it'll remind you that, oh, I need a lazy load. That's one of the things that I do as consulting within my organization. Lazy load, lazy load, lazy load. Timings as well. Timings can be difficult. In fact, this is one of the things that I really wanted to touch on because when you roll out performance budgets into your organization, the last thing you want is false positives, especially at the beginning. So that's one of the key pieces of advice that I have is to make sure that if you're budgeting, make sure that your timings or that what you're budgeting on doesn't have false positives and that your timings are stable. Before I forget, because this is a important part, I have some advice on keeping your timing stable. Within the type of websites that I work on, there's lots of third parties, and that can cause a lot of volatility in your metrics. So you don't want to include that within the metrics that you're budgeting on. It is important that you keep an eye on those things, but make it separate and budget for them separately. Accessibility budgets. This is about performance budgeting, but it's an easy thing to do. So don't forget to check the accessibility box within your performance budgeting tool. A lot of them come with that, so you can assert against that. And it's an easy win for accessibility. Just a caveat here, automated accessibility detection only catches like an extremely small amount of actual accessibility issues. I've seen percentages as low as like 3%. But that doesn't mean that you can't take advantage of some of those easy wins of making some simple mistakes. So don't forget to check the checkbox and don't forget to use your label tags. So back to performance. How do you roll out performance budgets within your organization? I mentioned that it can be easy to be too aggressive, and it can be difficult to sell it. One of my main pieces of advice is when it comes to rolling it out in your organization is to don't immediately jump to the slowest item on your page. Go to the fastest, because really this is about regression and keeping a conversation going. I'd recommend if you have a fast area already, do that first. Let's see here. Yeah, you really have to get everyone on board. So that's actually why I'm here. This is my sprint demo. Yeah, you have, I'm going to be giving this presentation to my organization as well. Another thing, make sure you plant those seeds early. I've been talking about this for a long time within my organization, and people are asking me for it now, and that's a wonderful thing. Some places to focus, areas that are really fast. New projects can be a great place to start. Just for like my context, the happy path is a great place to focus. This is the areas of your website that the users are going to be kind of jumping through. Some ideas of things that you can budget on. So things like time to interactive, speed index is an amazing visual metric. I was exposed to that by another insanely wonderful tool, Web Page Test. It's, people kind of look at it all weird, but it's really an incredible project. Just wanted to mention that tool. Yeah, bundle size, basically anything within the performance API. So like with SiteSpeedo specifically, it has an incredible amount of metrics. We'll talk about it a little bit more. You can even write your own performance budget metrics. SiteSpeedo is very pluggable. It's been that way for a while. Yeah, you can, I want this checkout button to display within this amount of seconds. It's pretty awesome. How do you figure out what your budget is? I think at Google I/O 2019, I think they released the performancebudget.io website, which is a great tool to kind of gauge. You can kind of use a slider to kind of estimate, how fast you want your page to load, and then slide like how many kilobytes of JavaScript and whatnot. So that's an amazing introduction of a nice little tool. Analyze your competitors. You can actually, there's a little SEO trick to find your competitors. I actually don't remember it. I don't know why I mentioned it, but yeah, just look at your competitors, see how they're doing. There's another thing is that when you're working against competitors, you want, just a slight difference between your competitor doesn't really make that huge of an impact. You got to be way faster than your competitor to actually notice. There's statistics on this and studies on this. What happens when you make a mistake? What happens when your budget fails in your pipeline? You can, obviously optimize the feature that you're introducing. You can remove other features. You can redesign the feature. You may even catch this early as you're, talking about it early in the design and development process. But it can just as easily be redesigned afterwards. Or just don't do the feature at all. It's an option. Less is more, seriously. It's so easy to forget. So here's a screenshot of the Sitespeedio budgeting results. I don't think I'm going to have enough time to do an in-depth demo, but the integration within Jenkins is pretty awesome. There's documentation on how to integrate that. The documentation on Sitespeedio is incredible. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about Sitespeedio. It has something called Coach. This is the thing that gives you advice. It has a philosophy of trying not to give you any bad advice. If you follow the coach, you will win. Browser time is the thing that kind of actually opens up the web page and tries to capture measurements. It's actually very cool technically if you deep dive into it. It uses this thing called XVFB, X virtual frame buffer. It's X server display. It's like an X display server, which is super cool. It uses the neat protocol. I'd like to dig into that more and dig into Sitespeedio even more. It has this tool called Page X-Ray. Also, shout out to the designer who contributed to Sitespeedio. These are all little icons that someone worked on for the project, and I'm just reusing them in my slides. So there's this Page X-Ray, which is really just kind of the format that allows different pieces within Sitespeedio to kind of understand what's going on. It's used on the compare.sitespeedio, which is a waterfall comparison tool. That's it's amazing work. Like this, I just love this project. Yeah, I definitely want to deep dive into that at some point. Here's an example of some of the format here. It's kind of neat. This is where you would, if you wrote your own plugin, you can add additional information. Let's see. So compare.sitespeedio, definitely check out that. The waterfall comparison, I'm obsessed with waterfall comparisons. I'll have to jump through some of these slides because I want to talk about the future here, especially when it comes to waterfall comparisons. I really love Sitespeedio because it just kind of fell within the technologies that I use at work. So we use Graphite and Grafana. They vend out Graphite and Grafana JSON, which you can just directly import to have insanely nice displays of all of your metrics if you're using Sitespeedio, not just for budgeting, but for tracking metrics separately. There's this there's this cool thing called throttle. I was reading I haven't deep dive into it, but there's some really interesting stuff about this. A lot of the volatility, again, like volatility within your timing metrics is critical. There's this kind of network replay thing that is an experimental right now, that it would capture during a test, what your network activity was, and then replay that activity so that stabilizes your metrics, which is a pretty insane idea. So Throttle is inspired by the funniest GitHub project name I've ever heard in my life. It's called, so we're talking about a tool that slows down your website. It's called Comcast. It's just incredible. I jokingly say read the manual because the documentation is insanely good. There's tons of integration instructions for, I've implemented it using my own personal GitLab instance, and it wasn't too bad. I didn't read the manual. Don't recommend not reading the manual. I kind of did it on my own. And I also integrated for work on a Jenkins instance. There's these are documented integrations for GitHub Actions, Jenkins, Travis, CircleCI, GitLab. The concepts are basically the same across platforms, but difficulty varies. For me, setting it up on Jenkins was difficult because at work we use just a plug for our blog. Our DevOps engineers are amazing. So engineering.rei.com, they write a lot about infrastructure as code there. And so I had to deep dive into Jenkins DSL, which is a little subset of Groovy, in order to implement this pipeline integration as infrastructure as code. So it seemed hard, so I gave it a shot. I don't expect you to be able to read this, and I wish I could pull it up a little bit more. But this is what Jenkins DSL looks like. I specified what I recommend if you're rolling this out to a large organization is to provide some default, sane, and generous budgets. And so that's what I tried to do. But you want to have that flexibility so your different teams who have different requirements and different needs can override those budgets. So that's what I did here. So I pulled in some default budgets, merged it with the project budget, and then did an assertion, which basically just ran Sitespeedio as a Docker image. And then I let we use Bitbucket know about that. And the Jenkins integration is awesome because it uses the HTML publisher plugin, which Sitespeedio will output like a full-blown website with a video showing the page load, illustrating the visual metrics, and all from when your build fails, you can output some text that'll link you to a nice little whole suite of HTML that you can kind of view and kind of figure out what's going on with your budget. GitLab should be pretty straightforward. Follow docs. There's lots of other budgeting tools and lots of amazing, absolutely incredible tools. One thing that you can forget is that Webpack actually has performance budgeting built in. You just may not know it. So when you see that your if you want to roll out some sort of basic performance budgeting into your organization, there's a flag within Webpack that you can flip to make sure that it fails if your bundle size is over some insane amount. So you can make that assertion there. Lighthouse is obviously amazing. It has Sitespeedio actually has Lighthouse integration, so you can use Site-SPDO to run Lighthouse and assert against Lighthouse scores, as well as assert against other Lighthouse metrics. But Lighthouse is a great place to get started. It's, if you're at all care about SEO, which a lot of people do, Lighthouse is definitely the thing to look at. Speed curve, I've experimented with this. It's incredible as well. The future. I think regression analysis is kind of empty. Maybe I just don't know much about the tool sets here. But I've done some basic experimentation. We've set up a private web page test instance within our organization where we have real devices that we can run tests against. And I just ran a job that ran a web page test private instance on real mobile devices and started plotting that information out on a graph using D3. And then I haven't seen done before, and this may exist, is you see the graph go up, but okay, what happened? Why? So what we did, you'd select the low point of the item that was ran by web page test, and you select the high point. And that took you to the wonderful waterfall comparison tool, where I've caught seriously so many issues while we had this experimental prototype up. It's the ease of being able to observe regressions is important. Within my own personal journey, setting up web page tests is not straightforward. And especially with physical devices. And I think it could be easier if tools like web page tests and other tools could start using the cloud. There's a lot of cloud services that are providing device farms. And if these tools can start integrating with those device farms, instead of plugging in your real phones, you can start using services like G-Cloud or AWS Device Farm to connect and run your tests. But right now, these are mostly focused around actual mobile app tests. So I don't really, I have a lot to learn here, but I don't really see a straightforward way to kind of run those tests in the browser and integrate it with the tools. I've spent a ton of time kind of doing research. Here's a couple of links, and the Google I/O talk is basically the same as this. I highly recommend checking that out. Google has put out so many amazing tools and guides and guidance. So I'll actually publish these slides and put even more links and credits here. That's my talk. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.